From the Bent Pixel Studios in Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Phone Booth Fighting, a weekly podcast talking about the world of mixed martial arts and beyond. With that guy,
I'm Frank Mir.
He's a two-time UFC heavyweight champion, current Bellator heavyweight competitor, and my name is Richard Hunter. I don't have any of those credits, but I got some other ones.
I like the other ones. I mean, you got the Naga silver medalist, two-time funniest man.
Thank you.
You're my go-to guy for almost every time I go to make decisions now.
Thank you. There's that.
Most of the time. Sometimes I don't tell you. I don't want the disapproving older brother look.
Do us a favor. If this is your first time listening to Phone Booth Fighting, don't let it be your last. Subscribe to Phone Booth Fighting via iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcasts. Phone Booth Fighting will be there. PhoneBoothFighting.com is our website if you'd like to support the podcast, and we certainly appreciate your support because that's how we keep it on the air, on the internet, for that matter. Do us a favor, click through the Amazon banner on the front of PhoneBoothFighting.com. Why would you do that, Frank?
Well, it's an easy way to help us out at the show. By doing so, any of the shopping you're going to do on Amazon, a small percentage of your purchases come back here to help us out the show at really no extra cost to you.
That's it. Can't be any easier than that. We've also got the store up. You can get your official Phone Booth Fighting merch at phoneboothfighting.com. That's another good way to support us. And above and beyond anything else, if you just tell a friend about the podcast, pass on the good word. If you know a friend who's a fan of mixed martial arts or maybe just good conversation, tell them about our weekly podcast and look us up in iTunes and click on those 5 stars. That helps keep us at the top of the ratings and rankings. We would appreciate it. And with that, on with the show. Frank, UFC, where are we, 235, I think 235 is nigh upon us here in Las Vegas. We've got not one but 2 titles on the line, so we'll be talking about that. I also had a phone conversation, speaking of those 2 titles being on the line. I had a phone conversation with the welterweight challenger, Kamaru Usman, and talked to him yesterday. We'll be playing that here in just a bit. But first things first, let's talk about the main event. That's Jon Jones, the recently returned Jon Jones, taking on Anthony Smith, defending the light heavyweight title. And it's been a drama-free week for Jon Jones. We still have, I don't know, 24 hours or so to go, but drama-free in the sense that the fight is still on. However, the test results, the USADA test results for Jon Jones have been released in anticipation of the fight. I think released because of the trouble that he's had up to this point. And the pulsing picogram makes a return appearance. Out of the 5 times he was tested, 2 of those tests have the bouncing, pulsing picogram. So the new rationale seems to be, and this is the official word, is that that low level of picogram does not give him any advantage in the fight. So therefore he will not be sanctioned. That sounds like an argument that you were making a few years ago.
Well, it really was. Here, again, first and foremost, when this test came out, it was only about 2 years old when they said I had the residual metabolites, or the metabolites in my system, at very low levels, similar to Jon's. And there was no explanation. They didn't understand the test well, and I was poking holes in it at the time. I remember even saying, like, okay, so I have these low levels in my system. You came and drug tested me 6 weeks before my fight. How do I have low level, you know, here at this date, 6 weeks and like 4 days later, and I don't have the parent compound at all in my system before? And that's the part that troubles me, is because already at that point, I think they start having doubts in the system of this test. You can see it even in Jeff Davinsky talking now. I mean, he uses response like, that's the $1 million question, when trying to answer something, because they don't know.
For you, it was a multi-million-dollar question.
Multi-million. I mean, shit, I lost my house that I was living at the time. I had to move back to the original home I had. I lost vehicles. I mean, basically financially in every way, it hurt me. And I had to... One of the worst things I've ever had to do as a man is to ask other people for money and borrow money to keep my kids in school because they all go to private school. I'm sitting there trying not to disturb their life as little as possible, getting a kid going from, and I know that might sound snobbish, like, hey, my kid's in private school and now he's have to go to public school. But I mean, there's already so many things going on. I was trying to maintain that their life, okay, as far as that aspect of it isn't going to change as little as possible. So it made it difficult. And the part that infuriates me with this is that right now they still don't understand the test. I mean, shit, just a couple months ago when he was getting ready to fight, for the title after they reduced his sentence because they said, oh, we don't feel like you intentionally cheated. I'm all, so you're telling me you felt that I was intentionally cheating? I mean, like, what's the difference between the two of us? At that point, even Jeff Novinsky's being asked questions. Dana White's being asked questions about the test. Dana, I think at that point was saying, well, no, you got to ask Jeff. He's the expert. Jeff Novinsky's, I'm not the expert. You got to ask this guy. There was really a runaround because, once again, they didn't understand the information. And they still don't. When asked, how long will this stay in Jon's system? How long are we going to be dealing with this pulsing pictogram of metabolite in a system? Don't know. Well, that information would have been really great if you would have listened to me back 3 years ago when you guys are telling me, well, it happened when this, had to have happened within 60 to 90 days. I'm like, well, it can't be farther back. I was told absolutely not. So when people are asking me questions like, well, why didn't you go to arbitration? Well, because I have the scientists telling me that I'm dead fucking wrong, that I'm just some high school graduate, that I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, and that there's no way it can go back 6 months, a year, or a year and a half, that I'm an idiot. Well, I guess I was right. Here, the college guy, I'm like, hey, buddy, so how long has it been in Jon's system now? Oh, for a year and a half. And he's the most tested athlete that anybody's ever seen, so he's not introducing new shit in his body. No, absolutely not. So now we're going 18 months right now and going. It looks like it could go on for years. So, I mean, we're talking about something that I could have been exposed to, or Jon has been exposed to, going back years. I mean, especially when I try to explain that to people. The culture of the supplement company, before Reebok, UFC fucked that all up for us, we were all sponsored. It was easy. I mean, shit, you get a couple grand a month by having different companies come in. Hey, here's our protein powder, here's this. And one thing I've always done is that I try not to be that dick that if you sit there and go, hey, I seen you were endorsing this multivitamin. Have you tried it? And I'm like, nah, man, they just fucking pay me. I don't want to ever be that guy. I'll honestly tell people like, well, I tried it, wasn't working for me, or I did, I like it. I honestly take everything that I've ever endorsed. And that means there's a lot of things I've taken that I didn't endorse because I took the supplement, work out for a week and go, I don't really think I want to put my name on this. And so now I have a situation where I probably would have tried to, even though at the time financially it just didn't make any sense. At that time, I had the same manager that Jon had, and I'm being told, oh, it's going to be upwards of $30,000 to $50,000 for you to go to arbitration because you have to have this attorney and come in. And I'm just like, and what are my chances of, he goes, well, you have to prove. I'm like, I can't prove. I have no way of proving. Well, you're not going to get your sentence reduced if you can't prove you accidentally came in contact with something. Jon still never proved how he accidentally came in contact with something. He got his sentence reduced. But again, had I known some of the information they have now, I would have probably fought harder and not just sat there and looked. I remember looking Hunter Campbell, the CFO and the CEO, or one of the guys, and telling him, like, I can't stay in the UFC. I don't know how I failed the first fucking test. And then a year later, you guys go and retest the sample that I passed before, 6 weeks before, that came out clean because it went to a lab in Southern California. Now you have that transferred to the Salt Lake City lab, which you say has even better equipment, and I still have trace metabolites being found in my system. So then I'm like, but you guys aren't listening to me. That still just adds to the confusion of the situation. So I have trace metabolites that now last 6 weeks. You told me it was 4 to 6 weeks, or the 40 to 60 days. So now I can be at the low level 6 weeks before, and 6 weeks later, I still have this low level. Like, when does it leave your system? 40 to 60 days. Are you guys not listening to what you're telling me? So obviously you don't understand the test well enough, and so that's why I had to ask for a release. The part that still pisses me off that the UFC did was that they held me under contract, which they've been known to do to fighters. They hold you under the full term, even knowing they're going to release you at the end of it. They did that to Drysdale. They did that to Tom Lawler, who also had, I think, 17 picograms of some substance in his body. They go ahead and they keep you under contract while you have the suspension. And as soon as that's up, they go, hey, by the way, you don't have a job with us anymore. Which even if they released you and you were still suspended, it still afford athletes the opportunity to start shopping around, looking for another job, going, okay, well now, I have obviously the suspension coming up, but I could talk to Bellator, talk to World Series of Fighting, the PFL. I can go talk to Risen. But at that time, they're like, no, you can't talk to anybody until the suspension's up. So you're just adding more stress on me when I can financially start taking care of my family again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and at the time, because you bring up the whole pulsing picogram thing, and that's the center of all this, it seems like, present day, because that is part of the commonality between you from several years ago now and Jon Jones now. Because I remember when this happened, it was, okay, trace metabolite, very narrow window when this could have been ingested. But you, as I recall you saying at the time, it was, okay, well, if this comes up now and I don't know where it came from or when it could have come along,
I'm getting 4 years now.
Will this keep coming up?
Right.
And no one knew. Right?
No.
So that was your argument of, hey, I can't stay in the UFC.
No,
because
I'm going to go
2
2-year suspension,
yeah,
and then double that out with a 6-year suspension.
Yeah, what if
essentially
it comes
just
up
retired
again?
me?
What if it comes up again? Okay, but now with Jon Jones, where it was acknowledged some months back at this point that, hey, not only has he tested for this trace metabolite, but this will pulse in his system and maybe there forever and ever. They are accepting that and saying, okay, you know what, because that doesn't give him an advantage competitively, we're not going to sanction him. But you weren't offered that path.
No. Well, and several things there that I have issues with. One, well, now obviously they're vetting the test a lot more and they have a better understanding of it. So I get it. I have no malice towards Jon. I hope that this comes out and fixes him too. He got screwed here too. It's just that I got screwed worse because whereas when Jon came up positive again with this pictogram, they didn't just jump. I mean, well, the Nevada Athletic Commission did. They said, hey, you ain't having the fight here. And they had to jump over to California and make it work in 4 or 5 days. But in my situation, they're telling me that, okay, no, it's only in your system for, 3 months. So if it comes up again a year later, 2 years later, how am I supposed to tell them, like, I didn't take anything? Well, yes, you did. Because, I mean, that's what they're telling me at the time. You took something in the last 3 months. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. And now with Jon, who has obviously access to more, resources than I do financially, and from what it looks like, USADA really helped. I really think they started seeing the cracks in the test with me. And then when it happened to Jon, obviously, look, I don't take any fault in that. Jon's the greatest fighter pound for pound in the world. They took more effort to fix him than they did on me. Here,
there are a lot more. Put it this way: there are a lot more people who have a lot more invested financially in keeping him.
Yes.
Eligible.
That's totally the truth of the matter. And it's not like they're lying or cheating and to try to throw him an extra curve. They're just digging deeper into it, finding out that the truth of the matter is that this test, they don't know. Again, Jeff Davinsky, the $1 million question, how long is it going to be in his system? That was never any kind of information that was affronted to me. Never helped me out. So then, in my mind, that's exactly why I said, hey, UFC, you got to let me go. And then I always suspected this. There's like little things that they do always made me wonder. I'm like, did you guys already know that this was bullshit? Because, for example, do you know how many times in that 2 years USADA came and drug tested me after that?
How many?
0. They never once showed up to my house. And I even one time, I think once or twice, didn't sign up for the testing quarterly thing, and they sent me a nasty letter going, you better fucking sign up. So they wanted me in the testing pool, and I re-signed up into it. Never came and knocked on my door to test me again. Why wouldn't you come test me again? Not once, not one time. Now I understand you sit there and go, well, if you weren't going to compete, why waste test? Well, why have me in the fucking testing pool if you're not going to randomly throw a test at me? So every guy who gets suspended has a free fucking 2-year steroid vacation now. It's like, hey, if you get busted for 2 years, they're not going to come knock on your door. Do whatever the fuck you want, and then make sure that you know the detection times of what you're taking and just get off of it. I think they realize that fighters are smart enough not, let's not let them use that. We're not going to come once every 2 or 3 months, but we got to throw them a test every now and then. I mean, I think going 24 months with zero testing starts to make me believe that you guys knew, because then if it would have came back again, what kind of, shit show were you opening up? Well, basically the one that came with Jon, where you open it up and go, well, shit, he's still testing positive, this whole pulsing thing. I think they suspected that even before Jon, and I think they suspected that with me. That's why, like, I've recently sent a letter to the UFC. Look, and USADA, I worked with the company for 16 years. I'm not quick to want to go ahead and just sue them, but there are things that I want to get fixed and remedy. I want my name cleared on this. That really fucking bothers the shit out of me. To a great deal, it bothers the fuck out of me. I want an apology going, hey, look, just tell me what you're telling Jon. You didn't understand the fucking test, that there's too many other variables and we're learning. Don't tell me that you flat out knew and now you're going back on it. Tell me to my face now that you knew you were wrong, that you made mistakes. The information you gave me is not the information you have now. So you gave me incorrect information. I made decisions to base off my life off that incorrect information.
Yeah, because it sounds like you're wondering aloud, where did the cracks in the system start to show? Privately, because publicly, I think it all came to bear once it affected Jon Jones.
I think when 12 months later, they sent my original test, that was the 6-week clear test that I passed here in Vegas, the random, when they came knocked on my door at 6:30 in the morning. When they sent that test, why would you do that? Months, it was like, I think 9 months later to be exact. I have to look because I have the paper when they emailed it to me. So I think it was in December from March, so 8 months. When you made that call and you made that decision, you're not randomly drug testing me anymore. Why are you sending my old drug tests back? Oh, you're digging deeper into this. That's great. I'm all for that. Figure the shit out. But how come you're not fucking helping me out? How come I'm not hearing anything? I mean, no one came and let me know that, hey, by the way, Jon's pulsing. When I found out? I found out when everybody else fucking found out. You don't think that's pertinent information to somebody that was part of your company? Be like, hey, by the way, let's throw out just camaraderie or just some type of just the same reason why I also just sent a letter, go, hey, this is my issues here. Let's not go to court yet, but let's point out some facts here real fast on what my issues are. And this is the problem. And then I get a return back from the UFC, extremely angry letter back, basically stating that, well, you signed that mutual release. You can't sue us for anything known or unknown mistakes that we might have made. I'm like, well, that's pretty fucked up, isn't it? So why would you put that in the letter, that anything that we might have fucked up on where we want to be protected from? Why? And, if you ask me why I signed the letter, I remember the attorney now that I have, he's looking at it, he goes, well, it's not impossible to get around, but we're going to have to jump through some hoops and figure this out here and look through this. He goes, that's so weird. They were so aggressive here with making sure that you couldn't go back and get them for something during this
unknown.
For the unknown. As they figure out shit, you can't come back and get us. Was there already cracks in the system at that point? Did you already kind of know? Did you already have the inklings that, shit, man, this test that USADA picked up, we don't really understand it. Just like Jeff Nowinski says. They don't really understand the science completely behind it.
Let me tell you what Jeff Nowitzki says about Frank Mir and at present day, and this is what he said on Joe Rogan's podcast. He says that the difference in the Frank Mir situation, when he was trying to explain the Jon Jones situation a few months back, is that Frank Mir had the opportunity to appeal and pay for retesting and all that sort of thing, and didn't do it. What I'll throw out, and then I'll let you react to this, because I was around for that discussion with you when all of that happened a few years back, and your conversations with your manager and all that about the possibility of doing an appeal was exactly what you said earlier, which is, well, you can appeal it, but you're minimum you're still going to get a 2-year suspension held up. It's going to cost this amount of money, but none of this pulsing picogram doesn't, the organization or USADA will acknowledge that this doesn't give you a competitive advantage and shouldn't be factored in. So therefore, the Athletic Commission won't sanction you, or USADA won't punish you. None of that was part of the conversation. And the analogy I would draw is this: It's sort of like saying, well, you know, this guy that we're DNA testing that's been in prison for all these years, you know, at the time, he didn't make a big noise about his appeals. Well, if he didn't have the money to do the appeals and no one was talking about a DNA argument at the time, that's a whole different set of factors. Of course, as the years progress and all of a sudden people are being released because there is a new acknowledgement that, hey, you know what, those tests mean something and those people were falsely accused, yeah, then it's going to be a whole different ballgame. Is that maybe a fair analogy to make to your situation?
I think it's an exact analogy where I'm giving information where I'm being told that the proof is that you're guilty. The proof that we have now. Now, that proof is different information I'm being told now, but I'm sitting there, it'd be like going to a courtroom and going, hey, look, we got you on this, you did it. And I know in my heart, no, I didn't do it, dude. Didn't happen. All the evidence says you did, that we have. So you either go ahead and, you know, you can battle this or, you know, and plead that you're innocent and fight it, and then we'll increase your penalty, or you go ahead and just say you're guilty and now you only do a couple years. You know, in that realm where it's like I sat there and looked at it, I go, okay, I can fight this, spend $50,000, and that right now I don't know when I'm making money again, because at that time, no fighting allowed. The commentary stuff, you can't commentate, you know, because I had a gig going with I was supposed to fly out that Monday when they released the paper that I was, you know, that I had flagged positive.
I remember that. Yeah, you're going to do the UFC broadcast desk, right?
No broadcast desk for you. So I'm sitting there going, shit, you guys are cutting every way I can have income coming in that I've developed over the last 16 years, commentary, fighting. These are the ways that I make money. You can still go and do autographs and whatnot, but right now I'm not the most popular guy because you guys released my name, that I have this in my system, and it's guilty before anything else. So now I'm going to take, you know, the only money I have on my bank account is the money I just fought. I'm like, shit, do I take that chance? Well, the people around me told me, no, don't take the chance. You're not going to win. You know, you're not going to beat this. It is what it is. Sorry. You know, in fact, to the point to where one of the individuals from the UFC tells my manager at the time, he just needs to admit it. He did it. So with that kind of information, I'm going to go ahead and now I'm going to go to arbitration.
Let's also realize this, that it's not even like a couple of years later, Jon Jones successfully appealed it. It's not like he successfully defeated it. It was that there was a reversal in position from USADA on the pulsing picogram. So it's not even, that's even worse, because it's not even like we can say, okay, well, Jon Jones he had more money, he put that money behind it.
He found the candy bar he ate that had it in there.
He did what you could have done if you would have made the choice to do it.
John spent all the money
even an option.
And more, and still didn't get a fucking answer.
Yeah.
And then he even knew to go back for 3 years. So I don't know how much money John spent on legal experts and testing all the supplements. And guess what answer they came back with? Nothing. They don't know. In fact, the only reason why his suspension got reduced was because, one, they told him, well, they don't feel like the intent to cheat was there. He didn't do it on purpose. I was like, okay, well, that would have worked. I would have gone, because me having picograms in my system or low-level metabolites, I don't think is a case for that I was trying to cheat or even having any advantage whatsoever. Same case they're making with John now. It's no advantage. Well, what advantage metabolites have in my system? None. If there's no advantage to him, there were no advantage to me. So the whole essence of us cheating is both in the same category.
One of the problems with these, with I think this whole testing scenario, and this is something that I heard Jeff Nowitzki openly acknowledge on Rogan's podcast, is that the levels, the minute levels to which they can detect trace elements, these companies, evolves further and further and further. And because it's a private industry and a competitive business, each lab or each patent or technology or whatever is striving to be able to test an even more minute level than the one previous. They want to be able to go to their potential client and say, we have the test that will detect the most trace elements.
And that's the problem I extremely have with that, because here, for example, 2 different weight training gyms I train at, they have the ability to make you a protein shake there. They have all these supplements. You open up cabinets, all kinds of shit, right? And this is just in the last 5 years, 2 different places I trained at, that when you got done working out, they had a whole kitchen that you can go to and make your protein powder. Now, I could be as vigilant as I want. I open up the case, I look at it, go, okay, cool. This is what I'm putting in my body. No problem. What about the fucking blender you just stuck it in? What if the last guy used a supplement that wasn't fucking approved, made his drink, someone washes it, lab tests all the time come back with false problems because of tainting. So I'm like, are you like boiling this shit and frying it? Like, is this really sanitary as it should be? Or is it just normal? The guy fucking used some soap and water, washed it out, rinsed it, cleaned it. The next guy comes by and he makes his drink. So you're making these tests that they're so fucking detailed that now I could have easily picked up a grain of fucking salt in the fucking Olympic-sized pool. You're telling me there's not a chance that there's something in there? There is. And now it opens up all these doors where, like, athletes now, it's like, shit, man, you got to be careful who you train with. What if one of the guys has it in his system? How much of it would have fucking affect you?
It reminds me, you know, I just had my annual physical, and you do the blood work and everything, and I got the letter back that has all the detailed, here's how the levels are and all that sort of thing. And modern day, the way this stuff works is you get the letter and it will tell you, okay, acceptable range is this to this. Here's where you were.
Ranges.
Yeah, and there was a little,
they do that with drug testing,
right? But the old days, you know, there was a time in medical history where they couldn't detect all that stuff. So basically, they either didn't find anything and you were okay, or they did find something and now you've got a 70% chance of surviving. And so as the technology evolved, and that was back in the day of, okay, you've either got it or you don't. Now, technology evolves to the point, and this is the analogy I'm drawing to the picogram essentially, is now it evolves to the point to where they can look at it and go, okay, in this category, all this stuff down here is ground clutter. Like, yeah, there's little elements of this or that, but that is within an acceptable range, so don't worry about it. If it were above this acceptable range, we would be talking about some kind of treatment, i.e. performance advantage, to make the analogy. If that, you see what I'm saying? So that's, it's, to me, it's like that in the sense of that was not part of your conversation.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Zero. And again, I think that somewhere, not just in my case, I think in the future they're going to have to go to where the essence of drug testing is that you're not cheating. You're not getting an unfair advantage, right? That is, to me, is the spirit in which our drug testing occurs in. I don't want athlete A to have an advantage over athlete B. But if these metabolites are such low levels, one, who knows how you were exposed to it, but obviously there's no fucking athletic advantage. And it isn't like I'm saying something that preposterous. That's what they're saying about Jon right now. We know he has these pictograms in his body, but if there's no advantage to him as far as an athlete, they're not giving him any athletic advantage. It's the same as, you know, having marijuana in your system. You can get pulled over, and if you're blood tested and it's in very low level amounts, or apply for a job, there isn't zero tolerance in the situations. They sit there, almost most job facilities have, like, hey, it just has to be here, because we realize that if your fucking roommate smokes, you might have some trace metabolites in your system and you never even smoked, but if you're exposed to it, well, that's kind of the same category I think we're here now with these drugs because of these pictograms. How do you know what you're being exposed to? It's getting to a point where it's such a small, minute detail. And I think it kind of goes to where now it becomes just a money-making business of trying to catch athletes. And it's really steered away from the essence of, well, he's a cheater.
You know who you are? You're the picogram pioneer. Never had a nickname.
No,
Maybe, probably don't want to start with that one.
No. That sucks.
Well, obviously, there will be more to come with this story, and we'll keep talking about it. As bad as it sucks for Jon Jones, I think that it probably was really, well, it was really vital to the situation to really peel back a whole important layer on it. You know,
no, I mean,
because if this had happened to virtually anybody, I mean, you think about lower down the roster.
Nope. Yep. I had an athlete manager who's reached out to me on social media, and I don't even know what to tell him. I'm like, dude, it's a rabbit hole that also says, hey, guess what? We're being flagged for the same metabolite. And I'm like, I guess I can send over the literature on what I'm getting, because a lot of the stuff that I get, because again, he has a lot more money than I do. You know, Chris Bello is that he's able to have these guys tested. And he has labs coming through. I mean, one of the reports on that I have, they're like, hey, we found that if you have certain ranges of potential for cancer, and at first it scared the shit out of me because I'm like, wait a minute, you're telling me I have cancer? They're like, no, but if your genes produce this type of situation, it could cause, and it will cause, a false positive in this. I'm like, fuck, do I have cancer? You know, I kept going back to that, like, wait a minute, do I need to be worried? They're like, not necessarily. Not that we're not saying you might not want to go get a physical again and just make sure. But once again, we're already starting to poke holes and show that there's a lot more ways to get a false positive with this than just having been exposed to the substance, which I'm starting to lean that direction. Because here with Jon, with having the UFC really behind him to help him out, figure this situation out with USADA, you know, they went up to bat to go ahead and move fights over for him. They do these things, which I'm kind of just piggybacking off of. I'm looking at it and going, well, I mean, the more you scream that he's innocent, the more I'm screaming I'm innocent. You know, you can't have it both ways. Mm-hmm. You know, the test itself, you guys are just learning more about it. And the only thing that's changed is your perspective on how to deal with the test. But where does that leave me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, a very important conversation to have, and we'll keep having it here on Phone Booth Fighting. One of the nice things about having your own podcast, Frank, is when you have something to say, you can just say it. You can just upload it to the internet, and it doesn't get taken out of context, and the whole context of the conversation is there. And if people want all the information, they can just go subscribe. And that's actually even going back a couple of years after the Mark Hunt fight and the USADA suspension. I think it was nice that your podcast was around then too, because we could just sit down, have the whole conversation, get it all out, and it was all, and it's still there. If anybody wants to go back a couple of years on the archives and listen to it, they'll get the whole picture. Well, let's talk about some fights then.
On a lighter note.
Yeah, on a lighter note. And speaking of Jon Jones, he is defending the light heavyweight title against Anthony Smith this weekend, UFC 235. I already mentioned that. Jones is a favorite here, obviously, but any thoughts on it going any differently than odds makers see it?
No. I always thought I used to think that maybe Daniel Cormier always had a chance because it's wrestling, but we've seen that's not the case. And going back, I've always thought, well, maybe Jeff or Gustafsson possibly has the opportunity to beat him because of, you know, he has superior boxing, you know. But then after watching the last fight, I'm like, well, shit, if you had to give me a list of guys I thought that might be able to get Jon, there you go. Anthony Smith's nowhere on that list. He wasn't even a blip on my radar of somebody like I'm sitting there going, you know what, that guy might give Jon a hard time. I really don't see anybody, I mean, besides catching him with a powerful shot, you know, like maybe, Anthony Johnson type power where like, well, if one of those lands, there is a chance he's going down. There is nobody I think that can beat him.
Are you seeing my Anthony Smith James Horn comparison?
Yeah.
Yet? The body type?
Yeah.
The glasses? Have you heard him talk?
No, that part I haven't.
Yeah. I mean, they even have a very similar sounding voice.
Yeah.
The tattoos. James Horn, if you don't know, Frank's main training partner. Yeah. Anyway, we'll have to get James on. Maybe we get James and Anthony Smith on together sometime. Yeah, that would be funny.
Some doppelgangers.
Yeah. The co-main event is another title affair. The welterweight champion Tyron Woodley defending his title against Kamaru Usman. I'll tell you what, we'll talk about that fight on the other side. But first, give a listen to this. This is a phone conversation I had with Kamaru Usman yesterday about his first ever title shot against Tyron Woodley. Kamaru Usman joins us on the line right now. He is co-headlining UFC 235 this weekend here in Las Vegas with a welterweight title shot on the line. He's taking on the champ, Tyron Woodley. Kamaru, good to talk to you, man. How you doing?
I am well, man. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Happy to have you, man. First question first, because I've been watching you progress toward this title shot for quite some time. A 14-1 record and a 13-fight win streak, never lost in the UFC. So after all those years of building toward this, does it feel like a title shot? Does it feel any different? Does it feel like every other fight to you, or somewhere in between?
No, absolutely. It doesn't feel any different at all. It feels just like what I've been doing. It feels actually even more. I'm more content right now than I was for my fight a few months ago in November. It feels just normal. It feels regular, and I'm just excited. I'm excited that the opportunities finally came, and it's time for everyone else now to understand what I've been saying for a long time, that I am the best in the world right now in this division.
You know, it maybe brings up an interesting point, because if you think about it, you know, everybody would think, okay, a title shot is going to come with a lot of pressure. But really, if you think about it, every fight you've had up to this point is working toward a title shot. So that means that there's always something else on the line besides a win or a loss. And in this fight, the title's on the line, sure, but it seems like maybe in a way it would be a little bit of a relief that you don't have to think about, okay, well, what are the implications for after the fight, because you've reached the top of the mountain here.
Oh, yes. You know, my biggest motivating for doing what I do is competition. And this is the biggest competition ever. And so I go out here and take care of him. And I'm going to be motivated and still waiting for the next biggest competition and the next biggest competition, because that's what drives me until I decide that, you know what, I no longer want to compete anymore.
Yeah, you know, I didn't realize there was going to be this much heat between you and Woodley, but back at the press conference in January, that's really when it kind of became obvious to me. But I've read since that you've talked about the fact that you've been sizing him up for a long time. You always kind of felt you knew where you wanted to go, and you kind of always felt like sooner or later you'd be in that cage with him. Is that true? I mean, is this just a matchup that's kind of been in the back of your mind for probably a number of years now, huh?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The moment this man became champion, I knew that's what I wanted, and I knew that's who I was going to get it from, because he was the placeholder at the time. I classify, I'm like an unstoppable train. It might be moving slowly, but it's eventually going to get to that destination, and there's nothing that can stop it. And that's just what this is. Woodley has been the placeholder, holding on to that belt, and now it's time for me to get right through him in order for me to get this belt. But yes, I've been sizing him up for years. We've actually even been out together, and I have very mutual respect. That's the biggest thing. Is we have, I believe, on my end, a lot of mutual respect. Like, I respect him. I think he's done great for what he's done. But now he's just a guy in my way.
Yeah, Woodley's a guy that can, at times in fights, start out pretty cautiously methodical. Do you have a feel for whether or not you expect, by virtue of your style, like a slower, more cautious start from him? What do you anticipate?
Well, I anticipate doing whatever I want to do. This is the thing with each and every one of my fights. I dictate what goes on. I dictate the pace. I dictate the location of the fight. I dominate the fight from start to finish, and I expect no different. If he did his homework, then he's going to put up a big fight. If he didn't do his homework, then it's going to be a short night.
Both you guys bring a wrestling background with you. How do you see that factoring into the fight in terms of wrestler versus wrestler?
I think it factors in in the way that he's going to be able to stay upright a little bit longer. But it is what it is. Like I said, I am the best at mixing it up in this game right now in this division. I'm not a one-trick pony. I have several tricks. I'm a workhorse, and the fact that he is a wrestler, that's just going to give him an advantage to stay upright a little bit longer.
Now, back when UFC fans were introduced to you via the Ultimate Fighter series, that was, of course, the Gym versus Gym season, the Blackzilians against American Top Team. And I know that yourself and several of the other Blackzilians have migrated on to Hard Knocks 365. Woodley still has his ATT affiliations a little bit. I know he owns an affiliate gym out where he lives. That was a very intense rivalry at the time. But now that the years have passed, are there any residual effects of that? That the fact that you guys at least have some historical ties to a rivalry that once was pretty intense?
On my end, maybe, but Woodley's not really. I know he represents the ATT brand only because his gym is basically a staple of ATT. That's just an extension of that.
Right.
But he's not really an ATT guy anymore. He's a Rufus sports guy. He trains in Milwaukee with Duke Rufus and all those guys. So that's really where his ties is at. But that doesn't make any difference for me.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether you're from this team or that team. When you step in front of me, you will be dealt with accordingly.
I don't think he was involved in the infamous sauna standoff from that season. That's the thing I always remember about you guys. One of the seasons was the infamous last stand of the sauna weight cut, right?
Yeah, it's one of those. We're very prideful with our things and our place. And if you're going to come in and there's going to be a little bit of disrespect, then it becomes a bit of an issue.
Well, Kamaru, this title shot is very well deserved. I mean that we've been watching you progress toward this, like I said, for a number of years. It all culminates this Saturday, UFC 235. Kamaru is going to take on Tyron Woodley, and also Johnny Bones Jones is going to be defending the light heavyweight title against Anthony Smith. So a title doubleheader on the line, pay-per-view, UFC 235. Kamaru, best of luck in there Saturday. I'll be watching. All listeners will be watching, and wish you the best of luck, man. Thanks for the time today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
That was my chat with Kamaru Usman yesterday, taking on Tyron Woodley, a guy who's undefeated in the UFC, Frank. Only one defeat on his record and a win streak that goes back about 5 years now. I remember first seeing him on the Ultimate Fighter, and he's a guy who has had a slow and methodical charge toward a title shot. I think, unfortunately, he's running up against Tyron Woodley, who is really good at a number of things.
Yeah, I think we had this discussion before. I mean, basically, Usman is well-rounded with a strong grappling background. Wrestled, I think, Division II. But I mean, everything that I can say that Usman's good at, I think Woodley's even better at. Woodley's extremely well-rounded with a wrestling background and hits really hard. And so. I don't know if it's going to be a barn burner of a fight. Honestly, I think it has the potential to be an accidental sleeper. I think I much rather would have had,
Colby Covington?
Yeah, I would have preferred Covington in there. I think that would have been a much more interesting, because Covington's stand-up ability and striking. I think, I see more of a potential there to beat him.
The one thing that's in the back of my mind about the Usman-Woodley fight, and I asked Usman about this, is maybe his best shot might be at pressuring Woodley early a little bit, because Woodley does have a tendency to be kind of methodical and calculating in terms of fights. Fairly recently, not taking real big chances early on. I mean, he had that spectacular knockout of Robbie Lawler, but if you look at since then, the Maya fight, the Wonder Boy fights, can be a little calculating, which has led to a lot of his success. But I also think that if maybe somehow you can disrupt that rhythm and pressure him, maybe there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, and then you possibly run into the chance of waking him up and seeing the Woodley that floored Robbie Lawler.
Yeah. No, there's that.
So yeah, it's always kind of a dangerous thing. Like, do you play the slow dance with him where he'll grind you out, or do you put him in a firefight where all of a sudden now maybe you wake him up and make him dangerous again? Yeah,
you mentioned Colby Covington. Now, Covington, after being denied the welterweight shot against Woodley, and
you got to go over the details again. How does somebody have the interim title, have it taken away from them, and not be the #1 challenger? Right. One, how do you not unify the belts?
Yeah.
I never heard of just dissolving.
Yeah.
I mean, because then, it's like, well, did the interim belt ever mean anything to begin with?
Maybe
we just don't use interim belts anymore.
Yeah, to my recollection, and it's frustrating because the interim stuff has really clouded the picture. I used to feel like I had a really good handle on all this.
I thought the interim was, okay, you're the champ until the champ can return. But he has to face you. You become basically the keeper.
Well, and interims used to be so much fewer and further between, because they took, as you know, I'm fond of saying, hey, I remember a time where you had to have a debilitating motorcycle wreck to introduce an interim title. Nowadays, it's just kind of, I'm going to be out for a few months, or what my understanding of that situation was, and I believe, you know, to Covington's point, he's going to say the UFC robbed him of the shot. I think to the UFC's point, they're going to say he didn't take the fight, you know, that he could have taken when it was offered. Woodley himself has not always been available when they've needed him to, or when they wanted him to, the UFC. But to my recollection, Covington was not available for Woodley at the time the UFC wanted him. And so they went ahead with this. And Covington is protesting that. I think Covington probably, this is the way it comes across to me anyway, Covington probably, while I think he has merit to stand on just in terms of what he's been able to do, he may be overvaluing his legacy position or lack thereof with the organization. Because the UFC, to my view, doesn't always look at people that it's not always the end of the argument when they just go, well, who's the most deserving of this title shot? No. I think a lot of times there are a lot of other things that factor in, and sometimes just flat out cooperation with the organization is part of it, you know. And if you've got a guy like Kamaru Usman who doesn't have a history of rattling your cage and holding you up and not being able to make a fight when you want to make a fight and things like that, sometimes they tend to want to just go that direction, especially when you've got, and this is just speculation on my part, but especially when you've got not one but two people in Woodley and Covington that maybe you feel like you've had fairly recent frustrating dialogue with in terms of trying to get fights made, or maybe they just see this as a little bit of a...
Well, and I think that they're going to suffer in the end. I think the UFC is going to be the ones that suffer from it, because I think that this is a very underwhelming card to begin with. As far as, you know, Woodley's not a huge draw. And, you know, I mean, unless it's changed lately, but you know, Woodley's been criticized for being extremely boring the last couple fights. Yeah. And now instead of putting an exciting fighter like Covington, who could have brought some excitement to it, he might have asked for more money, but you pay him the more money. He's more exciting. He's more out there. Now you're going to have Woodley fight somebody who's probably more quiet and not any more exciting to watch, really, in Usman. So now you're going to have those are going to be your co-main event. I think that comes into factor when people decide whether they want to pay for it or not. Am I going to go and buy this? They're like, who's he fighting? What kind of lead up has this had? Is there any kind of draw whatsoever? I mean, to it, to her.
Yeah, you do have a situation of, you know, you've got two title fights on the line, which is great. You've got
and you got the problem with John. No one thinks Anthony Smith is really
that was going to be my next
point.
I mean,
so your main event's not. It's like, well, we're going to see John fight again, but who's he fighting? Just somebody to go beat up.
The challengers are lesser known. Yeah, for sure.
So you could have made an explosive fight. The fight you could have made is with Covington and Woodley. Yeah, that's would have been a build-up to do 6 weeks before, to do the camera work, to build in. That would have been more intriguing. Covington gives you sound bites. Has Usman given any sound bites? I mean, to be honest with you, I forgot they were fighting until just the other day. I was driving down the freeway and I looked up and I was like, oh yeah, those two are fighting each other, huh? And I got to think that as involved as I am in MMA, if I'm thinking that, I'm sure a lot of other people are too.
Well, Colby Covington is he may not be on the fight card this weekend, but that doesn't mean he's laying low. He has made a couple of interesting appearances this week during fight week. The first was at the open workouts for Kamaru Usman. He showed up wearing his Donald Trump hat and a little tiny toy microphone, which was funny. And he's yelling into the megaphone at Usman, saying it should have been his title shot. He's got his interim, I guess his now expired interim belt over his shoulder.
The guy's not on the card, and he's the most exciting guy of the week.
Right. Well, he didn't stop there. He then went over to the Palms Casino and live streamed, I guess on his Instagram, tracking down Dana White. He finds Dana playing blackjack at the Palms and starts disrupting the game, asking Dana why he doesn't have the title shot. And Dana started insisting that he turn the recorder off, and it was turned off pretty quickly after that. But he's going around, and I'll tell you this: I even got a press.
I thought he was going to get in trouble for that.
Well, can that be an issue in casinos?
Yes, it's a huge issue.
Okay,
it's a huge issue.
Yeah,
you can't pull your phone out near a table game.
Okay.
In fact, I've done that. I mean, I'm sure any fans of the UFC will know. if you see one of your fighters in the casino and you want to take a picture with them, security doesn't like that if you're near gambling and pulling out. Yeah. I mean, if you sat there and we were gambling one night and you're up there on the craps table, if I pull my phone out and start texting people, I get told you got to step away. You can't pull your phone out and just start.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How they know what you're doing with your phone, you know? So yeah, you got to leave.
Okay.
Recording a table game is a no-no.
Well, that appeared to be an issue there. And then, you know, he's even, I got a press release today from a publicist who's representing Colby Covington, and maybe we'll get him on to talk about this. But the press release was letting me know all the things that Colby Covington is doing this week, and the fact that he had on some sponsor T-shirt, and that's who's reaching out. Is, hey, you know, would you like to have Colby Covington on because we're his sponsor? If you noticed during the video where he's stalking Dana, they didn't say stalking, but where he's tracking down Dana White, he's wearing our T-shirt. So you gotta say to this guy, I mean, you know, I think the whole villain shtick with all the MAGA stuff, or I don't know, some people might like all that, is at least he's branded it, you know, in a way that nobody else had. And then the other thing is the fact that you mentioned earlier, just in our other conversation, about how the Reebok era blew out all the sponsors. He's finding a way to pick up a lower level sponsor by going, hey, I'm going to be running around yelling at people, do you want me to wear your T-shirt while I'm doing it? And then hiring a publicist that will then promote interviews based on the guerrilla stuff that you're doing.
Hey, life changes, man. The social media is changing the landscape.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll bite on that press release because I got some questions for Colby Covington. I'm sure you do too. All right. So there's some fight talk. Hey, how about this Matt Hughes story?
Oh, shit. Yeah.
Matt Hughes lands himself on TMZ this week, kind of seemingly out of nowhere. And his wife and his brother both have restraining orders against him. The wife, because she says that he has repeatedly physically attacked her in recent times, and the brother, because they got in a fight over who owned a tractor. Boy, you know your country when you're fighting over with your brother over who owns the tractor. But apparently that is something that, according to the brother, led to Matt dousing the thing with gasoline, like he was going to set it on fire. Yeah, and then
Matt's nephew,
right, there was a talk about him being physically abusive to the nephew. So there are restraining orders against him. Now Hughes has come out with a response denying the assaults, but saying that, in a sense, it's sad that he's become a burden to his family members in the wake of his train accident, and he thinks this is their way of getting him out of their life and unburdening themselves with this person who's somewhat physically and I guess sometimes mentally challenged now because of the train wreck, literal train wreck that he had. You know, the first thing that I thought of when I saw that story, I did think about that train wreck, because I thought, okay, well, he's never been accused of anything like this before. He had this horrific car accident with the train, and it caused, you know, brain trauma and all this kind of stuff, so who knows what's coming out. Then you start, in the wake of all this, a lot of excerpts from his book have come out, that Matt Hughes' autobiography. I've not read it. I think it's maybe about 10 years old, something like that. But there's some bizarre things in there that he himself is talking about and acknowledging. Like basically bullying fights that he gets into. I'm not talking about you and some other drunk at a bar. I'm talking about, and I don't want to go out too far on a limb or make accusations until I should reread this to make sure I've got all the facts right. But I did read the excerpts from it. And, you know, not only like those kinds of physical altercations, but animal abuse, like on a farm. And I understand farms, you know, you're slaughtering cows and hogs and things like that. But stories that he told that he thought were amusing, that were basically like, I'm just going to cut these baby pigs open and throw the insides at you just to see if I can make you throw up. Like nothing that's part of the regular farming process, like stuff that obviously for somebody like me raises a big red flag, but I think for a lot of medical professionals would. Now I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, you know, sometimes could some of this have to do with this accident that he had? Yeah, perhaps. But I'll also tell you this. I mean, sometimes when people have those kinds of issues that just sort of lay dormant, sometimes something can happen that kind of brings them out. You know, it's like when people get drunk or high and they go, why is that guy such an asshole? And you're like, well, a lot of that's in there to begin with, and it just sort of brings it out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think chemicals or injuries necessarily make you different, but I think that, you know, you have certain, you know, they talk about that frontal lobe disorder, your ability to, you know, to keep yourself from acting on impulses.
To govern it.
Well, it means the impulse was there. You just had enough forethought. I mean, who hasn't had weird thoughts before? You sit there going, what would it be like if I stuck my hand in that machine? You know? So the thought was there, but your brain goes, that's a bad idea. Don't do that. You know? Whereas now you have somebody who's brain damaged or under the influence of something. They're like, let me go ahead and stick my hand in the machine. So, I mean, I think it's sad that he has brain trauma like that. But, I mean, I guess I'm split 50-50. One, I feel bad for Matt for having a mental injury that's causing him to have less control over his anger. I mean, you hear that all the time. People with PTSD or brain damage, their emotions are harder to govern. They'll slash out or rage, you know. But on the flip side, he is you know, I don't know how physically imposing he still is after the accident, but obviously more so than his wife. So, I mean, I guess on her part, just because there's a reason for why he's kicking her ass, because he has brain damage, doesn't mean it's okay that she gets her ass kicked. So I guess in that sense, trying to create some kind of safety for her to create a distance, I get it. You know what I mean? Like, so I just feel like there's really no winners in this. And I mean, I think I kind of feel bad for both parties. I feel bad for Matt for getting fucking hit by a train and the damage it's obviously caused, because she even said that in the paper. Since the train wreck, he, you know, has become this person. Well, shit, that sucks. That, you know what I mean? That it's not him. It's his brain is damaged. And then on her part, I do feel bad that, you know, shit, you know, she's like, well, I didn't sign up to get my ass kicked by a former professional world champion fighter, you know?
It makes me wonder if what he also needs at this point is mental help. And I don't mean in the physical therapy sense. I mean, I'm sure he's getting that. But now it makes you wonder if there's not a whole nother component to this where he needs like some serious psychological counseling as well.
Well, and it's scary because, I mean, you have Matt, who's a world-class athlete. I mean, physically an imposing creature, strong as a mule, you know, 7-time, I think, welterweight world champion, you know. And then if you're telling me that he's, you know, that now he can't fire on all cylinders, I mean, it's almost like he's a dangerous gun. Where it's like, well, it doesn't shoot as much as it used to be able to, but it goes off sometimes. I'm like, well, I realize it might not be as powerful, but it's still a fucking gun. And you're telling me it could go off for no reason if you just drop it. You know, the sear is a little bit fried on it. Yeah, it could happen. I'm like, well, shit, that's a problem, you know. And I think that's the problem with Hughes is going to have now. It's like he, you know, still knows how to fight. You know, he's a dangerous human being, I'm sure. And if he has brain damage from that train wreck, man, I just feel bad because I remember talking to Matt before that. I mean, he's a well-spoken guy, very likable. I never really sensed any kind of, like, if you would have told me this before the train wreck that, you know, he beats his woman, I'd be like, really? I don't see that. But I mean, obviously people have been wrong before about people, you know, Ted Bundy, everybody thought he was great. But that being said, I'm just like, you know, and then again, to reaffirm it, the wife is saying, since the train wreck, since brain damage, he's a different human being.
And she's not the only one. His own brother is saying he's got, it's not even like it's her brother.
His twin brother.
It's his brother. Yeah.
How many other people is he close to in the world closer than that? You know, and then, I mean, and then if he's attacking the kid, you know, I think the 15-year-old son of Mark or his nephew.
He was the one driving the tractor and
getting yanked off and thrown to the ground.
It's not your track. Yeah.
Scary.
Well,
then, I mean, that just shows you Matt was never the kind of guy that I would ever in 1,000 years, if you're saying, oh, he got pissed off by whose tractor it is, so he lit it on fire, or, you know, attempted to light it on fire. That just sounds crazy. Sounds like a guy got hit by a train that his brain, he's not firing all cylinders anymore.
No, I don't know him, but I'll tell you that kind of stuff. And then, you know, another thing, I mean, just going back, and I should look at this more in depth as far as what's in his autobiography, but, you know, those are his words. So, and he knowingly, willingly published them. So if I'm seeing things in there that to me are alarming.
Yeah, you have to point it out to me, because, I mean, you got to realize, too, people on a farm have a different appreciation for animals than you do. Even me. I remember my sister's first husband, her family owned a farm up in Oregon, cattle, you know, and to see how they treated the animals, like, you know, if a horse didn't move, it got moved, you know what I mean? Like, it was, you know, you sit there and go, you know, like even the dog, I went to pet it, like, what are you petting the dog for? I'm like, it's a dog. Like, no, it's a working animal. It's a herd dog. You know what I mean? Like, no, it sleeps outside, or, you know what I mean? Just, there's a different mindset of that type of person when you sit there and go, you know, where even I'm like, oh, no, fucking give the dog table, you know, human scraps and just bring him inside. He can sleep in the bed with us. I'm a dog person. I like them, you know? Whereas, you know, their mentality, I can see them being much more cold. So a person like that cutting up an animal, they're not seeing it how we're seeing it.
Well, yeah, but everything you're describing to me is not torturing an animal and laughing.
Yeah, like, you're right. No, so, and I didn't hear you say that part earlier, so
yeah.
I didn't know he was torturing the animals.
I mean, that was the way it was. It seemed
Are you
to
giving
be
lessons on critical thinking.
I know
here?
the screensaver. Jesus, hang on.
We got to wrap it up anyways, right?
Yeah,
It's
well, this is what happens when we don't have Porno Mikey. He's off on a job.
Well, if he's on a porno site,
yeah,
I don't think anybody's going to fault him.
That's right. Well, yeah, I'll look more into it. But I just, you know, I think it's that, you know, even though I'm not somebody that hunts or works on a farm or anything like that, I draw a distinction between, okay, are you doing the Native American thing where you're using, you know, every part of what you kill, or are you just being a dick?
Yeah.
You know, so that I'll decide at that point. Okay, just a couple of other quick things, and anything you got? Did you watch any of the either the Michael Cohen testimony, or the Trump excursion to North Korea? What'd you think?
Yeah, that was a disaster.
Yeah.
Huh?
What all did you think? Did anything stick out to you?
I think if you're a Trump fan, you're either gonna have to really double down hard and put your fingers in your ear. I mean, Cohen was his guy, and you know, to sit there and to try to defend anything and call him a liar, it's like, no. Why do you think he's fucking talking? They have all his fucking. They raided his office. They have his ass by the balls. So he's just like, look, I'll whatever you want to hear. Because the one thing I think it stood out the most to me, I'm like, well, if he's just making shit up, make that up. That's the biggest thing to make up out of everything. When they asked him about, well, do you know that Trump had, you know, personal knowledge of collusion with Russia? And he said, no. No, I don't. So I sat there and like, to me, that gave more validity to the other shit that he was saying. Like, well, you know, Trump cheats on his fucking taxes. He rips people off here. You know, a litany of issues that he brought up. The one that everybody was the start of this whole witch hunt is that, did you allow Russia, did you basically, you know, commit treason? And for him not to, it's like, well, if he's lying to save his ass, they probably, if he's going to make shit up, that's the biggest thing to make up right there. You just go there and leave it alone. You know what I mean? Like, there's really nothing else you need to say.
Yeah. The Michael Cohen has credibility issues. I don't dispute that. He's somebody who has been convicted of lying to Congress, and now he's in front of them again. So I certainly give you that. But what I'll say about that is this, that one, he showed up with documents. Those signed checks are going to be a big problem for Donald Trump. Not on the reimbursements for the hush money payments, because that is a verifiable crime. And the fact that not only did Trump sign one of the checks has Don Jr.'s signature on it, and Weisselberg, the accountant, who is fully cooperating.
Yeah, he's getting brought in.
They
haven't brought him in. He's coming in when? Next week or something?
Yeah, they're going to bring him in too, but he's already cooperating. So that's one. And then two, this was pointed out a number of times, and I think this is a fair point. When you talk about those credibility issues with Cohen, and it's certainly a valid point, in mob trials, the cooperating witnesses are not people you would want to invite over for Sunday dinner. They're never going to be the, oh, this person is is an altruistic hero. No, I mean, they're shady characters who are having to testify against other shady characters.
Well, I mean, yeah, Cohen is a scumbag who's helped out scumbag as shit go on. But I don't think that if he wants to save his ass, he's giving real information.
And if you didn't take that testimony into account, you would never convict a mobster.
True.
I mean, there'd be a ton of people that would have never been
turn all
convicted.
the time.
Sure.
Turn over a state witness.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the expression. He turned over and became the witness for the state. It's like, oh, he's a rat. Like prisons filled with rats with lenient sentences because they had to give up information.
Yeah.
And again, you can't just make shit up, because you make something up and now they go after Trump and they come and find out, let's hypothetically, Cohen lied. He made some shit up. And Trump can prove that he lied. What do you think that's going to do to Cohen's sentence? They'll come back and say, well, fuck you. We're off the table. You lied to us.
That's what's happening to Paul Manafort right now.
Yeah.
He lied, and now they're burying him under the jail. What'd you think of North Korea?
I didn't think much was going to come of it to begin with, to be honest with you. It seems like that charade has been going on since the 50s, us dancing back and forth. But I am... Hey, look, when Trump was being elected, I really honestly thought the guy was a savvy businessman. I would have said, I'm like, look, the guy's, like even sometimes when they say, hey, he inflates his wealth, when it serves him purposes, and he deflates it when it serves him otherwise. To me, I know you're like, hey, that's being crooked, but I'm like, that's just being smart. Like I do appreciate people that are savvy. But then it dumbfounds me. I'm like, you could be so savvy in this area and figure out how to screw people over. He screws the banks. How many times he declared bankruptcy and comes back and buys his own property? Well,
some of this could cross over into fraud, and that's where that's why those tax returns aren't getting released. Yeah. That it's not that he's so humble about his wealth, he doesn't want anybody to find out how rich he is. Like, that's embarrassing. Please don't point that out. That's not Donald Trump. There's a reason why.
Has he ever brought that up?
Yeah, right. There's a reason why those tax returns are not being released, and that's not it. But Cohen, another thing he testified to, and we'll see. But Cohen said, look, he showed me a $10 million IRS refund that he got. And said, how stupid is the IRS to refund that much money to somebody like me? I also heard something else pointed out, and I had not heard this before, that at some point in recent years, Donald Trump qualified for, it was called a star tax credit.
Right. You have to make less than $500,000 or something, was it?
Yes. And so if that is the case, best case scenario, if that's the case, he's not nearly as wealthy as he claims to be, but worst case, there could be some fraud involved, and that's something you got to look at.
Well, then I wonder about that, because, just like when he says, bankruptcy, well, he never personally has ever declared bankruptcy.
Right. It's always a corporate thing.
So it's his business. So maybe his finances run the same way. So you sit there and go, well, yeah, I only own $10 million, but the corporation that I own over there that's worth, $4 billion, who do you think runs it? That's my money. I'm just... it's like a shell game. We'll put it over there.
Well, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, even when you set up an LLC, things like that, that's to keep somebody, if somebody sues you, they can't get you personally and that sort of thing. Look, here are the things that I am willing to wager on up to this point. Not willing to wager on collusion. There's some other things that we're way far away, or the wisdom of impeachment or something. I'm not calling for anything like that, but I'll bet you a couple things.
My thought on the collusion thing is, look, did Russia meddle with our election? It looks like it did. They, through the Facebook stuff.
Any question about that?
Yeah. I've seen enough stuff out there. I'm like going, information war. I'm sure we do it to them too, back and forth. It's just the modern landscape of how, cyber warfare type situation. But as far as the collusion part, like, I don't think it's collusion for someone to go, hey, by the way, Trump, Russia over here just found this out and they're going to drop this. And he go, oh, cool. That'll help me the fuck out. It probably wasn't his responsibility. He feels like, well, I'm not going to fucking stop it or say anything. I'll just keep my mouth shut. It wasn't anything that he called up Russia and said, hey, can you do this for me? Or vice versa. So that's why I don't think there's necessarily collusion. I just think, was there kind of a turning a blind eye to somebody else doing something fucked up to your opponent? Yeah, it'd be like if you and I are both running for class president and I find out, hey, man, after school, they're going to fucking grab Richard and shave his fucking head. I'm all, I wonder if that'll hurt his chances of beating me. I didn't set it up. I didn't do anything about it, but is it really my responsibility to fucking blow the whistle?
Here's the thing, though, and it will be if it turns out that he had knowledge of a foreign power interfering. That's the difference. It's that foreign power. There have been instances in the past where one side of a general election got like the other side's debate prep book, for example, and they did the right thing, and they said, hey, we shouldn't have this. It got given to us under shady circumstances. We're giving it back. And that's all the honor system, and that's not something you're going to be prosecuted for even if you didn't give it back.
Okay.
But that wasn't a foreign power giving it to you. The laws are very strict about not only can a foreign power cannot give a candidate anything of value. So it can be money, it could be information, any kind of thing like that. So you could be gotten there. I think what's going to happen is, and I'm with you on most of that, because I think what's going to happen is, can you prove collusion? Don't know yet. Can you prove obstruction? I'll bet 10 ways to Sunday you're going to be able to prove obstruction. Because everything that he thought and knew that he could get away with in private business, you can't do as the president of the United States. Guess what? And I'll bet that's going to be a real revelation in a lot of ways. And probably a lot of that happened before anybody realized what was going on. And I'll tell you one more thing too, is that does he when you talk about the money, his personal wealth, is he richer than anybody else you know? Probably. Is he worth anywhere near what he claims to be worth? Not even close, I'll bet you.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the thing.
Well, I mean, that's part of his marketing. And to me, that's the intelligent part that I actually appreciate, that I wish I saw in more areas, where I just feel like, I'm like, shit, man, this guy is not winning any of these fucking battles he goes up to fight for.
I mean, sure, I'll give you credit for being a good con man, but not one of the things that I want to see on your resume if you're asking me to vote. And I'll say one other thing real quick though about North Korea, because I wanted to point this out. I actually think that it is good on I explained this to somebody on Twitter. I think it's good on I don't fault Trump for being willing to talk to Kim Jong-un. I don't.
No, I like that.
Yeah. The issue is this. These kinds of agreements are built from the ground up. So what'll happen is, but you and I are leaders, but before we meet, if we're adversaries, my Secretary of State, your whatever version of Secretary of State is, all that, those guys are meeting multiple times, and they work out essentially what we're both going to be willing to agree on. So when we meet, yeah, it's important that we're meeting face-to-face, but a lot of that has already been worked out, and we basically already know what we're going to sign a treaty to agree to before we're even face-to-face. Trump isn't allowing that. He wants to be the guy, he wants to go top down, and the problem with that is, you're giving Kim Jong-un something just by doing the photo op with him. That's a value to him. It's not a value to Trump in the way that it is to Kim Jong-un, because he wants to look legitimate. So you get these two guys together, and Un can just yank his chain. It's like being seen with a hot chick. I don't think anybody's ever compared Donald Trump to a hot chick, but for this analogy, I will. In Kim Jong-un's world, I'm with Miss Universe right here. I'm with the President of the United States. So let me get her on my arm, and I'm just going to string her along for whatever I need to tell her. I'll tell you what did bother me, though. We'll close with this.
I agree. Go ahead, go.
Is the Otto Warmbier thing.
Fuck yes, that bothered the shit out of me.
It was disgusting.
Now, look, here's my issue.
Let me explain what was said in case anybody didn't hear this.
Fuck, man. That bugged the fuck out of me, too.
Donald Trump was asked about Otto Warmbier, the American hostage who died essentially in North Korean custody. They sent him back to us in a coma, and he died a few days later. But he was already at death's door. And Trump was asked if he talked to Kim Jong-un about it. He said Kim Jong-un told him that he didn't know anything about that case until later, till after the fact, and Kim Jong-un told him he didn't know anything about his treatment, and he felt bad about it, and then Donald Trump said, I take Kim Jong-un at his word.
It seems so soft, and that's probably, honestly, my biggest complaint about Trump as the American, as the leader of America, the U.S., right? In too many instances, he seems soft against foreign powers. He's done it with Putin, where just like, oh yeah, well my guy said this, but Putin said that, so I went with him. I'm like, did you really just demasculate our fucking, CIA and our foreign observance? What? And then in that situation, even if you want to come to me with the argument like, well, they're trying to negotiate shit, calling him a fucking murderer probably would have helped out. I'm like, oh, that's fine. You just sit there and go, hey, guys, that's a non-issue. We're not talking about it. I've had those conversations where I don't agree with another person. If we talk about subject A, we are not going to agree, but we got to fucking talk about subject B. So instead of me bitching out on subject A going, well, yeah, I can see how maybe you were a little wrong about that. Hey, we're not going to talk about it. You know what I mean? I would respect that more. Be like, don't double down, I guess, and say like, oh, you're a fucking liar. I can see how at a negotiating table that might be an issue. But when he sits and goes, oh, Owen thought this, he goes, look, Owen brought it up. I know what happened. There's really nothing we're going to discuss about this at this time. We're moving forward. Like, I think there was other ways to jump through that without completely just backing down.
It's bizarre. It's something that no one even thought was a debatable topic. That's the thing. It's like you know, and you're right. The argument about, well, should we talk to brutal dictators who have a human rights abuse record? I mean, if we weren't willing to talk to them about whatever nuclear threat they were, then we wouldn't be talking to a lot of people. And I understand that 100%.
Yeah, I get it.
And if you say, you know, the answer to that question is, you know, that's a very serious situation that needs to be explained and resolved still, and I hope that we're going to get there. Right now we're talking about this nuclear threat, and then, you know, we'll work toward that. I get that.
Yeah, because then really Un comes away the winner in that, because he gets there and goes, Trump says we didn't do it. Look, UN, you know.
It's weird. Just
it gets him to back down.
I don't know.
And then at the same time, it's like, well, what did we get out of the conversation?
And here's the thing. As incensed as that makes me, I don't understand. To me, if you're the one who invited him in, meaning if you're somebody that voted for him, you should be yelling about it louder than I should. If you're having a party at your house and I bring a guy that, you know, breaks the chandelier, I need to be more mad at that guy than you do.
It does piss me off, because if we go back 2.5 years ago, if you said, hey, are you going to vote for Trump or Hillary? My argument was, well, I'd rather not vote for Hillary at all, so I guess I'll take Trump. You know what I mean? So, I mean, to me, I'm like, he's the lesser of two evils. You know what I mean? Like, I'll go with that one. Whereas with Hillary, I'm like, fuck that shit. You know what I mean? I'm not going that way. And then now I'm like, oh, fuck, dude, you look soft.
Sometimes.
And that scares me. As a world leader, like, I know there's other people that are the generals and whatnot that have to be respected. But, I mean, you're the face of the company, basically. If you look at America as a corporation and you look like a bitch, you know what I mean? Like, that makes me nervous. Like, I like somebody that seems strong. Like, now you see on the internet, they keep posting the picture of Obama standing there with Putin and standing there, and it looked strong. Whether or not how they negotiate and back and forth who won, but it's like the appearance of strength. We're a world power. We spend more money on our military than anybody else. I don't understand why we're walking so gently now. You know what I mean?
You've got to aggressively hold to account the people that you put in office. And I'll draw this comparison for me. Look, things that I vehemently oppose Bill Clinton on: the Telecommunications Act, the crime bill, repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act. Did I think he was a better choice than Bush 41 or Bob Dole? Yes, I did. And my vote reflected it. But that didn't mean that when he did things that I opposed, I wasn't at least attempting to yell louder than any of his detractors about it, because I felt like I had more of a responsibility. Same thing with Obama and healthcare reform when single payer wasn't on the table. I realized that's not the issue that other people had with it, but that was the issue I had with it. So what I'm saying is this whole idea of, well, I'm a Trump guy, and if I say one thing, you know, if I really hold his feet to the fire on something, I'm looking weak. You know, because that's the whole Trump thing. Never apologize, never acknowledge you're wrong, never back. No. To me, if you're a Trump person and if you mean to be America first and make America great again, all the rest of that, you ought to be screaming to high heaven about what he said about Otto Warmbier, because it was for nothing. It was just completely out of nowhere.
We got nothing out of it and just lost.
And all it did was shit on one dead guy and the dead guy's parents that are still alive. So how about that?
Yeah,
all right.
That was bothersome.
Tell them to follow us on social media, Frank.
Yeah, if you want to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, or Twitter. Facebook and Instagram is Phone Booth Fighting. Snapchat and Twitter, just Phone Booth Fight.
That's it. All right. For Frank Mir, I'm Richard Hunter, and we'll see you right back here next week on Phone Booth Fighting.